Chapter 21. What? I suddenly have two more fathers? That makes sense, Blake agreed with Dumbledore's statement, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to it. The place had been abandoned, and so had he, left uncared for decades. Yet, 11 years ago, someone had suddenly remembered him. The reason behind this sudden remembrance was a mystery to him. However, Blake's thoughts soon shifted to something even more astonishing. He looked at Dumbledore, his words slow and deliberate. So, strictly speaking, he began, pausing as if searching for the right words, the two of you could be considered my. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Dumbledore understood immediately. The idea that he and Grindelwald, with their combined age nearing 200 years, could suddenly have a son was ludicrous. Yet the undeniable truth was that Blake shared their blood. This connection made Blake a direct descendant of both him and Grindelwald. The Phoenix Fox's recognition of Blake as a Dumbledore was proof enough, especially given its reaction to Blake's distress. Dumbledore couldn't help but facepalm at the thought. Regardless of Blake's origins as Grindelwald's experimental subject, Dumbledore had already accepted him as a member of the Dumbledore family. He resolved to guide Blake towards becoming not just a good person, but an outstanding wizard. Despite the connection to Grindelwald, Dumbledore was determined to keep Blake away from him. You have the blood of the Dumbledore family in your veins, Dumbledore said earnestly. I hope you can consider rejoining the Dumbledore family, but the choice is yours. Blake met Dumbledore's sincere gaze and after a moment replied, I'm sorry, Professor. I need to think about it. Hearing Blake address him as Professor dimmed Dumbledore's spirits slightly. He had longed for a family connection, especially after the tragic loss of his sister Ariana. His brother had become a stranger to him, leaving Dumbledore to endure a long period devoid of familial warmth. Blake's emergence as a Dumbledore offered a glimmer of hope to fill that void. You should take your time to think, Dumbledore said softly. You've grown up here, and Lady Marian has been very kind to you. I understand it's not an easy decision. Regardless of your choice, I won't force you. Just remember, don't reveal your connection to Grindelwald. Given his history, which you're aware of, it's best to avoid the animosity associated with his name. Blake nodded. I understand, Professor. Dumbledore's visit had lasted from afternoon until the sky was studded with stars. Blake found it odd that Madame Marian had allowed Dumbledore, a stranger, to spend hours alone with him without interruption. Initially, Blake suspected Dumbledore might have used a spell, but seeing Madame Marian calmly waiting in the dining hall dispelled that notion. Are you done talking? Come and eat, Madame Marian invited, gesturing towards the table set with salmon soup and Blake's favorite spaghetti. It might not be as delicious as yours, but... As Madame Marian rose to greet him, Blake realized the depth of care and normalcy his life here offered, adding another layer of complexity to his decision. The lid was lifted, revealing the food inside, still steaming hot. Blake noticed something off about Madame Marian. Her voice was unusually nasal, as if she had been crying. Eat, you must be hungry, she urged. Okay. Blake replied, picking up the fork to start on the pasta. Madame Marian, clutching her handkerchief, watched him with a look of unease. Finally, she broke the silence. The elderly man who visited you this afternoon, he's a relative of yours, isn't he? Blake choked on his food at her question. Why would you think that? He managed to ask, coughing. Madame Marian sighed deeply. I've been running this orphanage for many years. I've learned to notice things. That man and you share the same striking azure eyes. Blake fell silent, not knowing how to respond. So, it's time for you to leave us, isn't it? Madame Marian concluded softly. I don't necessarily have to leave, Blake said, his voice tinged with sadness. This is a positive development, my dear boy. I may not know why you were left here, but I've always hoped that our children would find families of their own one day. To have a home, orphans without anyone to turn to are truly too pitiful. Later that night, in the woods outside the orphanage, Blake watched as the large brown bear he had befriended eagerly devoured the salmon he had brought. It seemed the bear hadn't managed to catch anything on its own. Without Blake's intervention, it might have starved. From now on, you'll be called Big Bear, Blake declared suddenly. Big Bear responded with a few sounds before stuffing another fish into its mouth. Blake, understanding the bear, chuckled. Just because you're named Big Bear doesn't mean you'll have a sibling named Second Bear. Big Bear seemed to ponder this for a moment before Blake suggested, "How about Xiong 3? You should focus on your meal," Blake said, watching Big Bear continue to eat. Reflecting on Madame Marian's words, Blake realized she knew about Dumbledore's visit and suspected he was there to take Blake back to his family. She supported this idea, understanding the importance of a home for an orphan. Perhaps it was indeed time to consider leaving with Dumbledore. Blake hadn't expressed a desire for a family. He saw nothing wrong with being an orphan. Yet, he couldn't help but think about the future. Leaving with Dumbledore meant having a powerful figure to support him. He mused, "It seems leaving with Dumbledore might be the safer choice if I want to avoid trouble in the future." Chapter 22. The Unusual Siberian Hamster. For many days after Blake's test, his emotional treasure chest system had revealed that anger was the most frequently dropped emotion, and the easiest to trigger. Shock and other emotions followed closely behind. This meant that, for the sake of rewards and becoming stronger, Blake might find himself engaging in more thrilling activities in the future. He reasoned that dancing in minefields would be inevitable, embracing the philosophy that death is like the wind, always by my side. However, Blake was comforted by the thought that as long as Dumbledore was supporting him and he didn't push the boundaries too far, he wouldn't find himself in mortal danger. In fact, making Dumbledore angry could even work to his advantage, as it would likely increase the drop rate of the treasure chests. While it might seem somewhat reprehensible, Blake justified his actions with the simple desire to grow stronger. With this mindset, Blake had resolved to take bold steps forward. Blake's belongings were few, as he had distributed most of his possessions to the other children. Holding a small suitcase, he looked around the small room that had been his home for years, feeling a pang of reluctance to leave. Madame Marian stood at the door, her eyes brimming with tears as she silently watched the boy she had cared for. "Madame Marian, don't be sad. I promise to visit often," Blake said, setting down his suitcase to embrace her warmly. "I've heard your relative is a professor. I believe your future will be brighter," Madame Marian said, trying to smile through her tears. Blake smiled back, knowing that the professor she imagined was quite different from the reality. After bidding farewell to Madame Marian and the other children, who watched him with heavy hearts, Blake approached the door where Dumbledore was already waiting for him. "Goodbye, everyone. I'll make sure to visit," Blake called out before he and Dumbledore walked away. They continued until Madame Marian and the children were no longer in sight. "All right, grab my hand. We'll use Phantom Shift to leave," Dumbledore instructed, explaining the spell to Blake, who marveled at the magic. "However, Professor, I just remembered I forgot to bring my pet. It'll go hungry without me," Blake suddenly said. "Oh, what pet? Where is it?" Dumbledore inquired, intrigued. "In that forest over there. It's a Siberian hamster," Blake replied, pointing towards the woods. After a short walk, Dumbledore was taken aback by the sight of a large brown bear, far from the small creature he had expected. "This is the Siberian hamster you mentioned?" he asked incredulously, staring at the bear that weighed at least 500 or 600 pounds. At that moment, Blake was gently stroking the bear's head, calming the normally ferocious beast with ease. Dumbledore watched in astonishment, half-jokingly wondering if Grindelwald had experimented with Newt's blood to achieve such docility. "Ding! Detected emotions of shock," the system announced, rewarding Blake with a silver treasure chest for successfully surprising Dumbledore. Blake's lips curled into a smile, pleased with the outcome, though he had hoped for a higher-level chest. Dumbledore, still processing the sight, considered the practicalities of caring for such a large animal and the complexities of using Phantom Shift with it. However, seeing Blake's bond with the bear, he remained open-minded about the possibilities. With the sight of joy in Blake's eyes, the initial hesitation vanished. After all, it was just a bear, and if Blake was fond of it, then they would find a way to keep it. "Professor, is there a way to bring it with us?" Blake inquired, hope flickering in his eyes. "Absolutely not. No, wait. Of course, there is a way," Dumbledore corrected himself with a smile that hinted at a solution. "May I borrow your suitcase?" Sure, Blake responded, handing over his suitcase to Dumbledore. Dumbledore placed the suitcase on a large rock, removed the few pieces of clothing inside, and set the FUPM aside. He then took out his old wand. Without uttering a single spell, a special kind of spatial distortion seemed to envelop the suitcase. There we go, Dumbledore said as he closed the suitcase and handed it back to Blake. Just face it and open the lid whenever you want to put the bear inside. The space is ample, it won't feel cramped. Blake accepted the suitcase, his surprise evident. Dumbledore had transformed his ordinary suitcase into a magical container capable of holding magical creatures. Turning to the bear, Blake gently patted its head and whispered a few words into its ear before opening the suitcase. In the next moment, the bear was seamlessly drawn into the suitcase without any resistance. Now, we can depart. Once we arrive at our new home, we'll let it out, Dumbledore announced. He then conjured a piece of cloth into a small bag and placed Blake's clothes inside. After settling in and getting acquainted with our surroundings, we'll head to Diagon Alley. It's time for you to buy your school supplies. And most importantly, your wand, Dumbledore added with a twinkle in his eye. I won't hand you the admission letter directly. It will be sent to you by owl. I wouldn't want to spoil the tradition of receiving your Hogwarts letter. At the mention of Diagon Alley, Blake's eyes sparkled with excitement. The prospect of finally visiting Diagon Alley and obtaining his own magic wand thrilled him. Having always cast spells without a wand, Blake was eager to experience the sensation of wielding one. Moreover, Diagon Alley would offer him the chance to purchase the books he desired on transfiguration, alchemy, and ancient runes, allowing him to meticulously plan his studies. P.S. Dear readers, the increase in monthly votes has been slow, and the numbers are disheartening. I've even resorted to casting 3 votes for myself in secret. It's a pitiful situation, and I'm earnestly requesting your monthly votes. Once the votes are in, I promise to remain dedicated to delivering the story. Additionally, the next chapter will take us to Diagon Alley. It seems that wherever our protagonist goes, excitement is sure to follow. And of course, new characters, including girls, will make their appearance. Chapter 23, An Old Friend Revisited. In the quaint town of Godric's Valley, Dumbledore's gaze lingered on the familiar sights, each corner brimming with memories of days long past. Nearby, Blake leaned against a wall, trying to steady his churning stomach. The discomfort from the phantom shift was unsettling, akin to the car sickness muggles often experienced. Professor Dumbledore. A middle-aged man approached with a brisk pace, his face unfamiliar to Blake. Mr. Pierre, Dumbledore greeted warmly as Mr. Pierre eagerly shook his hand, a bunch of keys in the other. We've completed the tasks you assigned. Here are the keys. Thank you, Mr. Pierre. Your efficiency remains unparalleled, Dumbledore expressed his gratitude, receiving the keys with a nod. Flattered by the compliment, Mr. Pierre beamed. It's my pleasure, Professor Dumbledore. Should you require assistance in the future, do not hesitate to call upon me. With a final look of admiration towards Dumbledore, Mr. Pierre departed, barely acknowledging Blake's presence. That gentleman seems to be quite the admirer of yours, Blake remarked, joining Dumbledore with his suitcase in tow. Dumbledore chuckled softly. In Muggle terms, one might say he's a superfan, though I believe he simply appreciates some of my endeavors. With the keys now in hand, Dumbledore announced, the new house is ready. To be precise, it's my ancestral home, though it's been many years since my last visit. He explained that he had enlisted Mr. Pierre and his team for renovations, leading Blake to the edge of town where the house stood. It was a modest 2-story dwelling with a barren garden in front and a lush hill behind, the structure seemingly embracing the natural slope. Blake was immediately taken by the scent of the woods, envisioning the potential of the small garden for cultivating exotic plants. The mixed community of half-wizards and half-muggles, coupled with the common practice of casting muggle-repelling charms, offered a discreet environment for his botanical and magical animal endeavors. After settling in and releasing Big Bear, Blake's curiosity shifted towards Diagon Alley, eager to explore the wizarding world's commercial heart. Initially, I planned to introduce you to the neighbors, but it seems Diagon Alley calls to you, Dumbledore noted, sensing Blake's excitement. Opting for phantom shift over traditional means, they arrived at Diagon Alley's entrance, bypassing the leaky cauldron. The initial disorientation from the teleportation faded, leaving Blake in awe of the cobblestone street and the bustling atmosphere. Pointing to a stack of crucibles outside a shop, Blake inquired about their use. Dumbledore explained their role in potion-making, amused by Blake's suggestion of using one for a hot pot. It's certainly possible, though unconventional. We could experiment with that idea, Dumbledore mused, embracing the novelty of the concept. Diagon Alley, with its wide array of shops and lively crowd, was more expansive and vibrant than Blake had imagined. The adventure was just beginning. Indeed, what you're most eager for is to obtain a magic wand, isn't it? Dumbledore said, leading the way as Blake followed closely behind. It was his first venture into the cobblestone streets of Diagon Alley, and he was captivated by the array of peculiar shops lining the path. Unfamiliar with their wares, Blake, maintaining the guise of a muggle-born child, peppered Dumbledore with a series of curious inquiries, some of which were quite unconventional. For instance, dragon's liver, 16 sickles for an ounce? How much does one sickle equate to? Can dragon's liver be cooked? Blake asked, his curiosity piqued. And why is there such a crowd around a broom? Don't they have brooms for sweeping floors at home? He continued, puzzled. Despite the odd nature of Blake's questions, Dumbledore answered each with patience and grace. Before long, they reached their destination, a shop that stood out from the rest due to its modest and somewhat dilapidated appearance. The gold lettering on the door, now flaking, read Ollivander, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. Inside the window, a solitary wand rested on a faded purple cushion, beckoning them inside. "Let's go in," Dumbledore suggested, a smile playing on his lips. Blake, filled with anticipation, followed him into the shop. Upon entering, they were greeted by the voice of a young girl dressed in green, her long blonde hair flowing down her back. A look of innate arrogance marked her pretty face as she recognized Dumbledore. "Professor Dumbledore? And who might this boy be?" she inquired, her interest clearly piqued by the sight of Dumbledore personally escorting a student to purchase school supplies in Diagon Alley. Inside, the renowned wand shop was surprisingly small, with only a bench tucked into one corner and nothing else. Behind the tall counter, thousands of narrow boxes, each containing a magic wand, were stacked from floor to ceiling, all covered in a thin layer of dust. Blake wondered if the dust was intentionally left undisturbed by Ollivander to lend the shop an air of antiquity. "Oh, Professor Dumbledore, what a rare visitor!" exclaimed Ollivander, emerging from the back. The wandmaker, a slender, elderly man with unkempt hair and striking silver-white eyes, left a lasting impression. "I recall that your wand was crafted by my grandfather. A fine wand indeed, though I'm sure you no longer use it, correct?" "Good afternoon, Garrick," Dumbledore greeted, pushing Blake forward. "I'm here to purchase a wand for this young man. He is the grandson of an old friend of mine, Blake Green." Dumbledore chose not to use his own surname for Blake, likely to avoid the complications of explaining the sudden appearance of a Dumbledore descendant. The surname Grindelwald was, of course, out of the question. Thus, he settled on Green and planned to introduce Blake as the grandson of an old friend. However, appearances can be telling, especially to someone as experienced as Ollivander, who had encountered countless individuals over the years. His gaze shifted between Dumbledore and Blake, a hint of suspicion in his eyes. "The old friend you're referring to wouldn't happen to be yourself, would it?" Ollivander asked, his tone laced with curiosity. Chapter 24. Ollivander's Discovery. The silence that followed Ollivander's outburst was palpable, and he immediately regretted his words. Revealing secrets that others chose to keep hidden was a delicate matter, and he feared he had treaded too carelessly. However, the tension was soon broken by the sound of the bell at the door, signaling a new arrival and dissipating the awkward atmosphere. "Ahem, miss, please wait a moment." Ollivander addressed the young lady in the green dress who had just entered. "I must first attend to Mr. Green, who arrived before you." He then offered an apologetic glance towards Dumbledore, who responded with a subtle nod, indicating his understanding and patience. Blake, meanwhile, had taken notice of the newcomer. Despite not understanding why she was present in this era, he was intrigued. To him, she represented an unexpected opportunity, a potential ally or resource in this unfamiliar world. Turning his attention back to the task at hand, Ollivander asked Blake, "Which hand do you use, Mr. Green?" Blake, tempted to boast about his ambidexterity, decided honesty was the best approach in this case. "Right hand," he replied, hoping to find the wand that would suit him best. Ollivander made a note of this and proceeded with a series of measurements that seemed almost comically thorough, from the length of Blake's arm to the spacing between his nostrils. Once satisfied, Ollivander moved to the shelves lined with thousands of wands, each waiting for its perfect match. Returning with a stack of boxes, Ollivander's excitement was palpable. He seemed to relish this moment, the anticipation of matching a wizard with their ideal wand. It was a process he found deeply fulfilling, akin to a parent witnessing their child's first steps. "Your compatibility seems broad. Let's try this one," Ollivander suggested, selecting a wand from the pile. He presented it to Blake. Yellow sen wood, unicorn hair, 12¼ inches, very elastic. Blake, feeling a mix of excitement and reverence, took the wand. It was his first time holding one, and the sensation was unlike anything he had experienced. The wand felt like an extension of himself, a conduit through which his magical power could flow more freely. "Seems quite suitable. Why don't you give it a wave?" Ollivander encouraged, his voice tinged with anticipation. As Blake waved the wand, a gentle breeze filled the shop, a tangible sign of the wand's compatibility with its new owner. "Excellent. This is a perfect match," Ollivander exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a job well done. The successful pairing of a wizard and their wand was always a moment of joy for him, a confirmation of his skill and intuition. Blake, too, felt a profound connection to his new wand. It was as if his magical abilities had been amplified, his potential unlocked. The sensation was exhilarating, a promise of the adventures and challenges that lay ahead. With the wand selection complete, Ollivander turned his attention back to the young lady in green, ready to assist her in finding her perfect match. Meanwhile, Blake couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation about the journey that awaited him, armed now with a wand that felt like it was truly his own. The dust, stirred into life by a gentle breeze, transformed into a drizzle that danced its way to the ground. "Ah, I knew it. You're very suitable for this." Ollivander's words hung unfinished in the air as the next moment was punctuated by a loud bang. The wand in Blake's grasp had exploded, its tip now resembling the bloom of a trumpet flower. Blake stared at the remnants of the wand, speechless, while an awkward silence enveloped the shop once more. "Ding! 3 types of shock have been detected. Ding! Currently drawing treasure chests for the host. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 3 silver treasure chests." Blake was well aware of the origin of these 3 treasure chests. He stole a glance at Ollivander, who was visibly dumbfounded. Do I need to compensate for this?" Blake ventured after a moment. Ollivander, snapping back to reality, hurriedly dismissed the idea. "Oh, of course not, my child. In fact, this is my oversight. It wouldn't be fair to make a customer bear the loss." Typically, a wand explosion occurred only if the wrong wand was chosen, a rare event that, until now, had been purely theoretical. The Ollivander family, with their long history in the wand-making business, had never encountered a wand self-destructing during a fitting. At worst, an unsuitable match might result in some minor property damage. Taking the damaged wand from Blake, Ollivander resolved to examine it later, convinced this was an isolated incident. He then presented a second wand, mahogany wood, dragon heartstring core, 11 inches, very flexible. This wand is particularly suited for transformation spells. Ollivander cast a meaningful look at Dumbledore, hinting at the renowned talent for transformation within the Dumbledore family. This time, he was sure of the match. Blake, feeling a connection with the new wand, pointed it at a box on the table. Instantly, the box morphed into a lifelike white pigeon that took flight, leaving those present in awe. "Oh, what a remarkable transformation spell!" Ollivander exclaimed, having never witnessed such prowess in a wizard so young. Dumbledore, wearing a proud smile, was not surprised by Blake's skill. As expected of, Ollivander began, turning to Dumbledore, who suddenly coughed, prompting Ollivander to halt his words abruptly. "Ding! 2 strong emotions of shock have been detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 gold treasure chests." The 2 gold chests were thanks to Ollivander and a little girl in a green dress, who watched Blake with wide, emerald green eyes filled with disbelief. "It seems this wand is a perfect match," Ollivander began, only to be cut off by another bang. The wand had exploded again. "I don't believe it," Ollivander exclaimed, his pride wounded. "Let's try another." The reputation of his shop was at stake, and he couldn't allow these failures to continue. Thus, for the next 10 minutes, the sounds of explosions were a constant backdrop to the passers-by outside Ollivander's shop. "Why don't I try a different one?" Blake suggested timidly, looking at the table through his fingers. Ollivander, face pale, leapt up. "No, I beg you, don't try any more. Perhaps you should visit another maker. The Grigovich family in Germany is quite reputable." Chapter 25. Unconvinced Cassandra. "He is better than me? Impossible." Cassandra's beautiful, large green eyes widened in shock as she observed the scene before her. Mr. Ollivander, a wand maker of world renown, ranked among the top 3 globally, arguably even the best, was visibly stumped by the boy before him. To Cassandra, witnessing a master of Ollivander's caliber nearly at his wits' end was utterly inconceivable. Pride had always been Cassandra's companion from a young age. In every aspect, her talents shone brighter than those of her peers, setting her apart and inevitably isolating her. The prospect of attending Hogwarts that year kindled a hope within her, the hope of finding a worthy adversary among her schoolmates. Her curiosity had been piqued when she saw Professor Dumbledore, a wizard of immense power and fame, personally escorting a boy through Diagon Alley. What made this boy so special that he warranted the attention of Dumbledore himself? Could he possibly be the opponent she had been longing for? Following Blake and Dumbledore into the wand shop, Cassandra witnessed something she had never seen or heard of before, Blake causing a wand to explode. Despite her worldly experiences and her family's long history, this was new to her, and it intrigued her deeply. Her astonishment only grew when Blake, with his second wand attempt, transformed a box into a lifelike white dove. Cassandra, despite her prowess, knew she couldn't achieve such a feat. She recalled how, under her parents' strict tutelage, it had taken her a week to turn a match into a perfect silver needle using her mother's wand, a feat that had astounded her parents, given her young age and limited magical power. Yet here was a boy, roughly her age, effortlessly performing transfiguration she deemed impossible. For the first time in her life, Cassandra felt bested by someone her own age. A mix of shock and a budding rivalry took root in her heart. She begrudgingly acknowledged his skill, but was quick to rationalize her feelings. "I admit you have the potential to be my rival," she thought, her pride wounded. "But if I had a mentor like Professor Dumbledore, I could do it too." Meanwhile, Blake, aware of Cassandra's mixed emotions, noticed her reaction. Before he could ponder further, the system chimed in, rewarding him with a gold treasure chest, followed by a diamond one, thanks to the intense emotions his actions had elicited from Cassandra and Mr. Ollivander. Although pleased with the rewards, Blake couldn't fully enjoy the moment. Seeing Mr. Ollivander's disheartened expression, who had inadvertently contributed to the diamond treasure chest, left Blake with a bittersweet feeling. The wand shop was vast, filled with countless options, yet not a single wand seemed suitable for him. It was a disappointing realization that he wouldn't be able to purchase a new wand that day. Moreover, the day had turned out to be quite unfortunate for Garrick Ollivander, the shop's owner, though the mishap wasn't intentional. Dumbledore, feeling responsible, addressed Ollivander. "I'm sorry, Garrick. I'll compensate you for today's losses." He then took out a money bag and placed it gently on the counter. The damage was significant. More than 80 wands had exploded, resulting in a loss of over 500 gold galleons, considering each wand cost about 7 galleons. Dumbledore was puzzled by the day's events, but suspected it had something to do with Blake's unique background. Being a new life form, cultivated in a petri dish, Blake was no ordinary wizard, and that difference might have contributed to the incident. "Don't worry, Blake. As for the wand, I'll think of a way." Dumbledore reassured him, understanding the deep yearning a young wizard has for their wand and the disappointment of not being able to acquire one. Just as Dumbledore was about to lead Blake away, Ollivander, with a look of determination, stopped them. "I'm not short of money, Albus. Although Mr. Grimm blew up so many of my wands, you've brought me an unprecedented challenge. I says he couldn't shy away from it, Ollivander declared, his earlier consideration of sending Blake to Germany for a wand now seeming cowardly to him. As the world's top wand master, he couldn't admit defeat so easily. Mr. Grimm, Ollivander approached Blake, gripping his arm. Clearly there's no wand in the shop that suits you at the moment. Therefore, I'm going to craft a wand specifically for you. Blake, taken aback by Ollivander's bloodshot eyes and the offer, hesitated. He had caused the destruction of over 80 wands, yet Ollivander was refusing compensation and instead offering to make a custom wand for him. Please don't reject this offer, Mr. Grimm. I assure you, if I can't solve this problem, no other wand maker will be able to either. Moreover, I see this as a fantastic opportunity to advance my craft, Ollivander passionately explained, his fervor making him seem almost mad. Blake, realizing the importance of having a wand and touched by Ollivander's dedication, agreed, "Okay, I accept." Ollivander's response was to envelop Blake in a grateful embrace, a gesture that left Cassandra, who was observing from the side, utterly bewildered. They're about to blow up your store, and you're thanking him, she thought, unable to comprehend Ollivander's enthusiasm in the face of such chaos. Chapter 26. Blake's sister, were you outdone by me before I even made a move? In order to truly craft a wand that suits you perfectly, I may need you to visit once a day for the next 2 days, Mr. Ollivander said with palpable excitement. This will allow me to adjust certain parameters as needed. It had been years since he felt this motivated, the last time being when he completed a challenging task set by his father. Dumbledore, observing the interaction, did not object. If Ollivander could resolve this issue, it would indeed save him a considerable amount of trouble. He picked up a wand that had been destroyed by Blake, examining it closely. Although wand lore was not his primary field of study, its connection to alchemy enabled him to quickly decipher the underlying issues. Setting aside the damaged wand, Dumbledore glanced at Blake, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The wands had been destroyed by an immense amount of magical power. Could it be that Blake, still a child, possessed more magical power than an adult adept? Dumbledore couldn't help but wonder about the boy's potential as he grew older. A trace of fear crept into his heart. If the experiment from years ago had succeeded, this child, inheriting both his and Grindelwald's talents, would undoubtedly have become Grindelwald's most formidable weapon. Mr. Grimm, could you describe how you felt when you held the wand? Ollivander asked, setting aside a book and picking up a quill, his gaze fixed on Blake with serious interest. Well, when I first held the wand, I felt a strong urge to cast a spell, Blake began, recalling the sensation. And after casting, it felt incredibly satisfying, like releasing a surplus of energy. He smiled, though the feeling had been short-lived due to the wand's destruction. Upon hearing Blake's description, Ollivander set the book aside and picked up a damaged wand, examining it closely. His expression turned to one of shock. He had harbored doubts upon hearing Blake's initial explanation, but now, after a thorough examination of the wand, he confirmed his suspicions. Blake then heard the system prompt again, indicating that no more treasure chests would drop from the target for the day. He sighed, pondering why Ollivander had only dropped 3 treasure chests before reaching the quota. Realizing the significance of the diamond treasure chest Ollivander had dropped, Blake understood that the quality of the treasure chest affected the quota. Higher quality chests took up more space, and thus the quota was reached sooner. Hermione, in contrast, had only dropped silver and gold treasure chests, which explained the higher quantity of drops. Ollivander, unaware of Blake's thoughts, turned to Dumbledore, exclaiming, "Mr. Green, you truly are an amazing genius." Dumbledore smiled, acknowledging Ollivander's realization of the problem. However, this praise irked Cassandra, who had been overlooked throughout the conversation. The term genius had always been associated with her, and she couldn't stand the thought of someone else being recognized as such. Humph, is it just because his transformation skill is better than mine? She thought bitterly. Mr. Ollivander, why are you suddenly praising me? Blake asked, genuinely puzzled. Mr. Green, can't you see how powerful your magic is? Ollivander replied, somewhat exasperated. The wands didn't explode because they were unsuitable for you, but rather because your magical power is so strong that it caused them to burst. Blake was taken aback by this revelation. So that was the reason behind the exploding wands? Magic wands had just been tested, and the outcome was beyond anyone's expectations. Blake had managed to overload the wands with his immense magical power, causing them to explode. Cassandra, who had been observing from behind, was taken aback. The idea that someone her age could possess such a formidable level of magic was astonishing. She had no reason to doubt Ollivander's assessment. The renowned wandmaker had no cause to lie. As Blake received another system prompt, congratulating him on his achievement, he could almost picture the look of shock on Cassandra's face. He mused to himself about her competitive nature, silently acknowledging her as his next challenge. Dumbledore, having observed the incident, shared his insights. "Blake, your magical power is quite unique," he began, using an analogy to explain. "For most, casting a spell is akin to opening a faucet to let water flow from a pool. They can control the flow precisely. But in your case, it's more like using a high-pressure water gun. Your spells are more intense and forceful." Blake was surprised, not just by the accuracy of Dumbledore's analogy, but also by his knowledge of Muggle technology. Dumbledore's explanation made it clear that if Blake could learn to moderate his power, he wouldn't risk damaging his wands in the future. Cassandra, unfamiliar with the concept of a high-pressure water gun, nonetheless grasped the essence of Dumbledore's explanation. The realization that Blake had to hold back his power to prevent his wands from exploding left her in disbelief. She couldn't stand the thought of being outmatched and silently vowed not to be left behind. Despite having not yet directly interacted with Cassandra, Blake had already made a significant impact on her. The system notifications confirmed as much, indicating her fluctuating emotions and the rewards Blake had earned as a result. He couldn't help but feel a bit amused by how easily he had managed to unsettle her, even without trying. As the narrative continues, the author encourages readers to engage with the story by voting and commenting, promising that their support will lead to more frequent updates. The playful reminder not to hoard books hints at the author's commitment to delivering more exciting content. Chapter 27, Cassandra's Determination. Cassandra stood quietly behind Blake, her small hands gripping her skirt tightly, betraying her inner turmoil. Despite her outward calm, Blake could sense her unease. With his beginner level of godly telekinesis, a gift from his previous newbie pack, Blake was adept at reading people. Although this skill might not work on someone as powerful as Dumbledore, it was more than enough to understand the emotions of a young girl like Cassandra. Blake found himself intrigued by Cassandra's determination. He admired her stubbornness and desire to be strong, even if it meant challenging him directly. It was a refreshing change from the usual reactions he received. As Ollivander prepared to measure Blake for a wand, Blake interjected, reminding the wandmaker of Cassandra's presence. Ollivander, having been so focused on the challenge Blake presented, had momentarily forgotten about the young girl waiting her turn. Apologizing profusely, Ollivander approached Cassandra with an offer to compensate for the oversight by gifting her a wand. However, Cassandra's pride wouldn't allow her to accept such charity. She insisted on paying for her wand, surprising Ollivander with her resolve. Cassandra's request for a custom-made wand caught everyone off guard. She wanted a wand that was perfectly suited to her, just like Blake. Her determination was palpable, and her glance towards Blake carried a mix of rivalry and challenge. Blake couldn't help but compare Cassandra's fiery spirit to Hermione's. While Hermione had also faced challenges head-on, there was a certain innocence to her approach. Cassandra, on the other hand, seemed driven by a competitive edge, eager to prove herself as Blake's equal. Ollivander, recognizing Cassandra's earnest desire, agreed to her request. The atmosphere in the shop shifted as everyone prepared to witness Cassandra's journey to find her perfect wand. It was a moment of growth and ambition, a testament to the power of determination and the desire to stand on equal footing with those we admire. Cassandra, despite her usual hostility, occasionally sent Blake candy. Reflecting on her personality, Blake realized she was fiercely proud and competitive. She always desired to have what others didn't and to surpass those who did. Perhaps the challenges she faced today were more than she had ever encountered in her life. Upon hearing Cassandra's request for a custom-made magic wand, Ollivander looked at Blake in surprise, mistakenly thinking the request was inspired by Blake's desire for one as well. Custom-made wands, after all, were known for their superior compatibility with their owners, and it wasn't uncommon for wizards to request them. Indeed, our shop offers a custom wand-making service, Ollivander explained, though it does come at a higher price. That's not an issue. I have money, Cassandra confidently stated, pulling out a pouch filled with gold coins that jingled pleasantly. Blake could only sigh at this display of wealth. Money had never been a primary concern for him. Even during his time in the orphanage, he was relatively well off. And now, as a member of the Dumbledore family, he was far from needy. Dumbledore, having been the headmaster for many years, had accumulated wealth through his salary, book royalties, and published papers. Thus, financial worries were foreign to Blake. Ollivander, dismissing the need for excessive payment, invited Blake to participate in the measuring process for a custom wand. "Come over here, and let's get your measurements. We can start crafting your wand tonight." He quickly deduced that Cassandra must be from a wealthy, pure-blood family, a status that often came with significant riches. It was an opportunity he was eager to seize. "Now, if you'll come with me to register, we can begin the measurements," Ollivander directed. "Albus, perhaps you and the others should take this time to purchase the remaining items on your list. It's getting late." Realizing it was nearly 4:30 p.m. and that many shops in Diagon Alley would soon close, Blake knew they had to act quickly. Ignoring Cassandra's glaring hostility, he left the wand shop with Dumbledore to continue their shopping. The one place Blake was most excited about visiting was the bookstore, hoping this time their visit would be free of incidents. P.S. Dear readers, your support through comments, votes, and reviews is immensely appreciated. Your engagement fuels the story's progress and ensures frequent updates. Let's keep the momentum going. Chapter 28. A Solo Adventure in Diagon Alley. Emerging from Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, Blake made a beeline for the neighboring Flourish and Blot's bookstore. Dumbledore, watching Blake's eager stride, couldn't help but smile. It reminded him of his own youthful excitement, with the bookstore holding a special place in his heart, second only to Ollivander's. Dumbledore's gaze lingered on the young wizard, stirring a long-dormant feeling within him. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced since his days before becoming headmaster, guiding young Muggle-born wizards and witches into their new world. Yet, the connection he felt with Blake was different, more personal. Could it be because Blake was, in some way, family? A bittersweet smile crossed Dumbledore's face as memories of his sister, Ariana, surfaced. He imagined a life where she hadn't met her tragic end, picturing the joy of accompanying her through these very rites of passage. It was a poignant reminder of the familial bond he'd long missed. At the entrance of Flourish and Blot's, Blake's anticipation was palpable. The day was drawing to a close, and the store was quiet, the earlier bustle having subsided. "Let's go in. You can pick out any books you like," Dumbledore offered generously. Their moment was interrupted by an owl, swooping down with a letter. Dumbledore caught it with surprising agility, his expression turning serious as he read the message. Blake, noticing the change, braced himself for disappointment. "If it's something important, you should go," he said, understandingly. Dumbledore apologized, explaining the urgency of the matter. Blake, though slightly disappointed, was understanding. He knew of Dumbledore's responsibilities, not only to the school, but also to the wider wizarding world. The fact that Dumbledore had taken the time to help him settle in was more than he could have asked for. "Here's some money for you," Dumbledore said, handing Blake a pouch. "Feel free to buy whatever catches your eye. Just avoid books authored by me. We have plenty of those at home." He added instructions for Blake to find accommodation at the Leaky Cauldron, and mentioned that arrangements had been made for Blake's pet, Xiong-Da, and his belongings. With a reassuring smile, Blake watched Dumbledore depart, his heart racing with the prospect of freedom. Alone in Diagon Alley, the possibilities seemed endless. He could explore to his heart's content, starting with the treasure trove of books before him. But first, he had to act quickly. The bookstore wouldn't stay open forever. Efficiently, Blake approached the counter, list in hand, ready to dive into the world of magic on his terms. This was the beginning of an adventure he wouldn't soon forget. Blake stepped into the store, immediately requesting the clerk's assistance in gathering all the textbooks listed for his courses. As the clerk set about the task, Blake began to explore the vast expanse of Lehan Bookstore. It reminded him of the wand shop in Diagon Alley, with shelves towering almost to the ceiling, filled with an array of books that seemed to defy the ordinary. The bookstore was a treasure trove of knowledge, housing everything from massive leather-bound volumes that could cover the floor to tiny silver books no bigger than postage stamps. Some books were filled with indecipherable symbols, while others seemed completely blank. In his exploration, Blake even stumbled over an invisible book that had fallen to the ground. Despite the oddities, the majority of the books were of the more conventional sort. After some time, Blake's eyes lit up as he discovered titles that piqued his interest. Application of Advanced Transfiguration, Introduction to Ancient Runes, and Introduction to Alchemy, among others. He diligently moved his chosen books to a pile, determined to immerse himself in subjects like potions and herbology, hopeful of what rewards the future might hold. The clerk, observing Blake's enthusiasm and the growing stack of books, couldn't help but smile at the sight of such a dedicated customer. After assisting Blake for the third or fourth time, the clerk returned to the counter with another stack of books, while Blake decided to take one more look around the store. His gaze was drawn to a book with a red cover high above him. However, as he craned his neck upwards, he failed to watch his step and tripped over something, or rather, someone. "Ah!" Blake exclaimed as he stumbled. "Ah, sorry." He quickly apologized, realizing he had tripped over a little girl with two braids who had been engrossed in a book at the bottom shelf. His accidental misstep had not only caused him to fall, but also step on the girl's foot, leaving her on the verge of tears. Ding! Grievance detected, a voice chimed in Blake's head, followed by, "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining." Blake, momentarily distracted by the notifications, hurried to help the girl up. "I'm so sorry. I was just trying to get a better look at that book up there and didn't see you," he explained earnestly, hoping his genuine apology would soothe her. Perhaps moved by Blake's sincerity, the girl eventually shook her head, indicating she accepted his apology. Wanting to make amends, Blake quickly added, "There's a dessert shop opposite the bookstore." It was unclear whether he was suggesting they go there as a form of apology or simply sharing his excitement. The girl, shy and having spoken only a few words to Blake, her ears turning red, quickly picked up her book and hurried out the door, almost forgetting to pay for it in her haste. Blake watched her leave, feeling a mix of regret for the accident and hope that his apology had been enough. He turned back to the clerk, ready to finalize his purchase, his mind still on the vast world of magic and knowledge that awaited him. Chapter 29. A shy encounter leads to an unexpected reward. Blake swiftly settled his bill at the bookstore counter, his purchase so substantial that the store provided him with a suitcase enchanted with a traceless stretch spell to accommodate the volume of books. This kind of magic, allowed within certain specifications, was similar to the enchantments on the money bags produced by Gringotts, enabling the suitcase to hold a surprising amount of books despite its compact size. With the suitcase in hand, Blake exited the bookstore. The sky had darkened, and the bustling streets of Diagon Alley were beginning to quiet as the number of pedestrians dwindled. His first stop was Ollivander's wand shop to complete the day's data measurement, a task delayed by an unexpected interruption earlier in the afternoon. Afterward, he made his way toward the leaky cauldron, navigating the familiar path through Diagon Alley. However, upon reaching the brick wall that served as the gateway between the leaky cauldron and Diagon Alley, Blake halted, struck by a sudden realization. He knew the route from the leaky cauldron to Diagon Alley, but the reverse path eluded him. The original work had never specified the method for returning. Contemplating his next move, Blake considered using his magic-infused finger to tap the wall, lacking a wand to perform the task more traditionally. If that failed, he planned to seek advice from Mr. Ollivander. Just then, a small figure appeared beside him, a familiar face from the bookstore. "Ah, it's you! We meet again!" Blake exclaimed, recognizing the little girl. Her knowledge of the area could prove invaluable. The girl, Hannah, blushed upon seeing Blake, her voice barely above a whisper as she greeted him. Blake apologized for the earlier bookstore incident, to which Hannah shyly responded, insisting it was merely an accident. Introducing himself as Blake Green, he extended a hand in greeting. Hannah, in turn, introduced herself as Hannah Abbott, her touch light and brief, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of red. Blake, amused by her shyness, asked if he could call her Hannah, to which she hesitantly agreed. He then inquired about the way back to the leaky cauldron, and Hannah, with her wand in hand, provided the necessary instructions. Following her guidance, Blake watched in awe as the wall shifted to reveal a doorway. Expressing his gratitude, Blake offered to treat Hannah to dinner, an invitation she declined with a level of shyness that triggered an unexpected notification in Blake's mind: a gold treasure chest reward for detecting extreme shyness. Surprised by the reward and Hannah's bashfulness, Blake respected her wishes, promising a rain check for the dinner invitation. As Hannah hurried into the leaky cauldron, Blake was left pondering his own appearance, humorously questioning whether he resembled a monstrous creature to elicit such a shy reaction. Blake rented a room at the Broken Cauldron bar, and after a quick meal, he retreated to his room. Setting aside the box of books he had acquired, his attention turned to the more thrilling task at hand, opening the treasure chests he had collected. As he surveyed the chests in his system space, his mood lifted significantly. Today had indeed been a fruitful day, not just in terms of quantity, but also quality. Among his haul were 4 silver chests, 5 gold chests, and 1 particularly enticing diamond chest. Upon seeing the chests, Blake couldn't help but draw in a sharp breath. Notably, Cassandra had contributed 3 of the gold chests, making Blake smile with satisfaction at her high drop rate. "Old rules. System, open the treasure chests for me, starting from the lowest quality," he commanded. The system quickly complied, opening the 4 silver chests. To Blake's delight, each chest contained a book that could be directly learned: elementary magic spell proficiency, elementary magic staff proficiency, elementary herbology proficiency, and elementary alchemy proficiency. Blake was particularly pleased with the books on alch, emi, and herbology, as these were areas he was keen to explore further. The magic staff proficiency was a welcome addition, though he had no plans to encroach on Ollivander's territory. As for the magic spell proficiency, it would slightly enhance his casting speed, a modest but useful improvement. Next, Blake turned his attention to the gold chests. "Open the gold treasure chests," he instructed. The system announced his rewards, the highest level of magic staff proficiency talent, which made Blake chuckle at the thought of Ollivander. He then asked the system to open the remaining 4 gold chests simultaneously. The rewards were astonishing: the best talents in herbology, weather spell proficiency, prophecy, and cooking proficiency. Blake was overjoyed but puzzled by the prophecy talent. Could Cassandra also possess the prophecy talent? And what about my supposed Grindelwald bloodline? Why haven't I felt any prophecy talent before? He wondered. As the author of this tale, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to my readers. Your support, through votes, comments, and encouragement, has been invaluable. This story has now surpassed 70,000 words and is at a crucial juncture. If you've enjoyed the journey so far and wish to support further, I kindly ask for your votes and feedback. Thank you for being part of this adventure. Chapter 30, The Custom Wand Package, a wand to rival the old. Blake didn't dwell too much on the prophecy talent. After all, the answers were beyond his reach at the moment. Perhaps Dumbledore could shed some light on it later. For now, he focused on the rewards he had received. Overall, they were quite impressive. The herbalism talent and the druid template seemed to be a perfect match. Blake could already envision the plants he cultivated pursuing his enemies across the globe. At this point, the wand talent and the prophecy talent were not immediately necessary for Blake. However, the weather incantation mastery and cooking mastery were right up his alley. These were skills that could be directly learned and applied. One would enhance his offensive capabilities, while the other promised to delight his palate. Considering how delectable the dishes from his intermediate cooking skill had been, Blake was excited to see what culinary masterpieces he could create with this top-grade cooking skill. The thought alone was enough to make him consider preparing a late-night snack. But there was something else that demanded his attention. A diamond treasure chest yet to be opened. The previous chest had yielded the druid template, leaving Blake thoroughly impressed. Now, with another diamond chest before him, anticipation bubbled within. "System, open the diamond treasure chest," Blake commanded. "Ding, opening the diamond treasure chest." "Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining a custom wand package." A custom wand package? Blake was momentarily taken aback, unsure if this reward could measure up to the druid template. "Ding, a custom wand package has been detected. Would the host like to use it?" Without a moment's hesitation, Blake chose to proceed. "Yes, use it." He was curious to see what this customization entailed. "Ding, customizing the wand for the host." "Ding, the custom-made wand is a success." "Ding, please select your preferred wand appearance." Blake pondered whether this customization was merely aesthetic. "Well, if this wand can withstand my full power, then this reward might just be worthwhile," he mused. Although Ollivander had promised to craft a wand specifically for him, success was not guaranteed. Entering the customization interface, Blake found himself in a sealed space, facing the silhouette of a wand. Soon, various options appeared before him: size, shape, color, special effects, and template. As he weighed his options, a notification appeared. "Ding! As long as the wand remains in the host's possession, the host can customize his wand as many times as desired." With this newfound freedom, Blake decided not to fuss over the wand's appearance. Opting for something less conspicuous, he quickly settled on a design, a 15-inch long wand, as dark as night. Its pure black body and handle exuded an understated elegance. Satisfied with his choice, Blake confirmed his selection. "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a custom-made magic wand." In an instant, Blake's consciousness returned to reality, and he saw the black wand floating before him. Taking a deep breath, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness. After all, his history with wands was tumultuous, to say the least. What if this one? Blake could hardly believe the sensation that coursed through him as he held the wand. Initially, he feared that the wand might not withstand his magical power, considering it was custom-made. However, he quickly realized he had underestimated the quality of the system's craftsmanship. The moment Blake grasped the wand, a single word dominated his thoughts: powerful. That was his initial impression, a feeling of overwhelming strength. But as he delved deeper into this connection, he discovered something more profound, a sense of unity, as if the wand was an extension of his own body, seamlessly integrated with his blood. With a swift motion, Blake waved the wand, channeling his magic into it. To his astonishment, the wand not only withstood the surge of his potent mag, but also amplified it twofold. This revelation was staggering. With this wand, Blake realized he could cast spells with double the usual power, a significant advantage in any magical confrontation. "This wand, it's incredible. I wonder how it compares to my old one?" Blake mused, genuinely curious. The system, usually silent, responded this time. "Ding! The wand's material and core are unknown. It measures 15 inches in length and possesses exceptional flexibility. Its quality matches that of your previous wand." Blake was impressed. "As expected of the system's products," he exclaimed, admiring the wand in his hands, unable to resist its allure. His thoughts then drifted to Ollivander, who was also crafting a custom wand for him. "I wonder if Mr. Ollivander's creation can even compare to this," Blake pondered, his curiosity piqued. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit stone chamber, an old house elf named Gucci presented a photograph to Grindelwald. The photo, a still image from the Muggle world, captured Blake with a hint of unease in his expression. Grindelwald, examining the photo, seemed lost in thought, particularly fixated on Blake's azure eyes. After a moment, he inquired about Blake's well-being, to which Gucci responded with praise for the young master's looks and talents. Grindelwald then instructed Gucci to take care of Blake, expressing concern that Dumbledore, with his myriad responsibilities, wouldn't have the time to do so. Gucci, worried about leaving Grindelwald alone, suggested her son could look after Blake instead. The next morning, sunlight gently caressed Blake's face, rousing him from his slumber. He had fallen asleep at his desk, surrounded by open books. The night had been spent customizing his wand and delving into the books he had brought home. Thanks to his exceptional academic genius and eidetic memory talents, Blake was able to quickly absorb and retain the vast amount of information, flipping through pages with unparalleled speed and comprehension. Chapter 31. The Irresistible Breakfast. Blake stared at the book on the table, its contents suddenly rendered meaningless after a brief glance. With a scratch of his head, he mused, "I really am diligent." His attention then shifted to his magic wand, which he twirled fondly for a moment before stowing it away in the system warehouse. Given the current circumstances, he couldn't openly carry it. Blake had resolved to commission Ollivander to craft a wand identical to his own so he could wield it without arousing suspicion. If Ollivander refused to customize the wand's appearance, Blake would have to accept whatever design was offered. With this plan in mind, Blake left his room, intent on starting his day with breakfast before planning his activities. Upon arriving at the bar counter of the Leaky Cauldron, Blake was greeted by the sight of stale bread and dry steaks on the customers' plates. He sighed, acknowledging that the establishment's affordability was its only redeeming feature. Approaching Tom, the bar's proprietor, Blake inquired, "Boss, may I use your kitchen?" Tom responded, "Feel free to use it, but you'll need to pay for any ingredients you use unless you bring your own." Blake casually tossed a gold coin to Tom, who caught it with ease and noted Blake's name in a ledger, saying, "I'll deduct the cost of the ingredients you use." "Understood," Blake replied, before dashing into the kitchen. Thanks to the system's resources, Blake had access to exquisite ingredients. His cooking skills, already perfected at an intermediate level, had only improved. Soon, the tantalizing aroma of frying steak wafted from the kitchen, drawing curious glances from the other patrons. The scent was unusually appetizing, prompting one customer to exclaim, "Boss, is that steak being cooked in the back? I want one." Tom, busy with his ledger, explained, "That's a customer preparing his own meal. I'm afraid I can't take orders for it." As Tom spoke, Blake emerged from the kitchen with 2 perfectly cooked steaks. Observing this, Tom added another entry next to Blake's name. Blake, ignoring the attention he was attracting, sat down to enjoy his meal. "Ah, the wonders of the system's supreme-grade cooking proficiency," he thought, nearly moved to tears by the steak's exquisite flavor. Just then, a sleepy Hannah descended from upstairs. "Good morning, Hannah," Blake greeted her cheerfully. Good morning," Hannah replied, her usual shyness less evident. "I'd like to treat you to breakfast as a thank you for your help yesterday," Blake offered, sliding the extra steak across the table. Tom watched the exchange with interest, realizing why Blake had prepared 2 servings. Hannah hesitated, initially inclined to decline. However, the irresistible aroma of the steak weakened her resolve. Before she knew it, she was seated next to Blake, fork in hand, poised to taste the steak she had intended to refuse. "Why am I doing this?" she wondered silently, her rationality clashing with her instincts. Despite her internal protests, her body acted on its own, drawn by the steak's enticing scent. Ultimately, Hannah surrendered to her desire, closing her eyes as she savored the delicious bite. In that moment, it was clear, though she might have wanted to say no, the honesty of her appetite, captivated by the fragrance of the steak, spoke volumes. Hannah bit into the food, her eyes widening in surprise. It's delicious." The meat was tender and juicy, with a texture that was simply unparalleled. Hannah had always prided herself on her cooking skills, but this was a revelation. "Oh no, what if I can never enjoy such delicious food again?" she lamented. Suddenly, a chime sounded in her head. Ding! Detected the emotion of joy. Another chime followed. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 silver treasure chest. The delightful meal had made Hannah unusually talkative, particularly when she sought Blake's advice on cooking techniques. After breakfast, Blake, feeling rejuvenated, made his way to Diagon Alley once more. His visit the previous day had been somewhat restricted with Dumbledore by his side, leaving many places unexplored. One such place was Ollivander's shop, which he had missed. Today, however, he had a different destination in mind. The herb shop. Blake had visited the shop briefly the day before, but had been unable to purchase certain seeds due to Dumbledore's presence. Today was different. As he approached the entrance of the herb shop, Fate seemed to have a sense of humor, for he spotted a familiar green figure. Cassandra was crouched at the entrance, meticulously selecting seeds. A slight smile played on Blake's lips at the sight. It seemed he was about to gain another treasure chest. Intentionally making his footsteps louder, Blake caught Cassandra's attention. He made no move to speak to her, planning instead to walk past. However, Cassandra called out to him. "Wait!" Blake's smile widened. He had anticipated this. Cassandra, known for her expertise in herbology, had likely recognized him from their encounter at the wand shop. Her pride would not allow her to miss an opportunity for retribution. "My name is Cassandra Worley," she said with a hint of arrogance, acknowledging their previous meeting. "Oh, so it's you," Blake responded, feigning surprise. "Hello, Miss Worley. My name is Blake Green." He then gave her a scrutinizing look before commenting, "Miss Worley, is there something wrong with your neck? You seem to be looking up quite a bit. It might be wise to consult a doctor. After all, it's quite unladylike to have one's nostrils on display." Cassandra stiffened, her composure nearly shattered by Blake's remarks. Accustomed to carrying herself with grace, she found the insinuation of being unladylike intolerable. Ding! Anger detected! The familiar chime sounded in Blake's head, followed by, "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest." Blake couldn't help but smirk at his own cunning. "I'll anger you to death," he thought, confident that Cassandra wouldn't simply walk away. Her desire for revenge was too strong. As expected, Cassandra took several deep breaths to calm herself, choosing to ignore Blake's previous comments. "Are you here to buy herb seeds as well?" she asked, attempting to steer the conversation back to a more neutral topic. "Oh, of course. I have a bit of an interest in herbology myself," Blake replied nonchalantly, as if completely oblivious to Cassandra's hostility. "P.S. Striving for 10 chapters today. Your support through flowers, monthly votes, and evaluation votes means the world to me." Chapter 32. Cassandra's Frustration. Cassandra was seething with frustration. "I'm so mad. Why am I not even as good as him in herbalism?" she thought, glaring at Blake. Her attempt to regain some ground in their ongoing rivalry had backfired spectacularly. Blake, sensing her agitation, couldn't help but feel amused internally. Yet he maintained a composed exterior. "Is that so? Then do you recognize this seed?" he asked, pointing to a seed Cassandra had been examining moments earlier. Without waiting for her response, Blake continued, "This is the seed of blackroot grass, Miss Worley. Blackroot grass is quite remarkable. Consuming it can mitigate some of the damage caused by magic. Its roots are jet black, contrasting sharply with its pure white flowers, making it quite distinctive." Cassandra bit her lip in irritation. She hadn't asked for a lecture, yet here he was, dispensing knowledge as if she were a novice. "Did I ask you? You just went on," she thought, even though she had to admit he was correct. Before she could retort, Blake spoke again, his tone still even. "Miss Worley, your eagerness to learn is commendable. Even during a casual outing, you seize the opportunity to expand your knowledge. Since you seemed puzzled, I felt compelled to share what I know. I hope you don't mind. And if you have any more questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to share my knowledge." Cassandra was dumbfounded. What does he mean by saying I seemed puzzled and asked for his advice? Wasn't I testing him? How did this turn into him tutoring me? She thought, her frustration mounting. Who doesn't know about blackroot grass? My family is in the herbal medicine business, for heaven's sake. Her anger, which she had barely managed to suppress, flared up once more. However, before she could express it, Blake continued, "Many assume that growing blackroot grass is straightforward. Just plant the roots in soil. But that's a misconception." Cassandra was incensed. Who doesn't know that? She thought scornfully. Blake, undeterred, went on, "While that method might work, it limits the plant's growth to a mere 15 inches. However, by employing the grafting method I've developed, you can grow blackroot grass up to 30 inches tall, significantly enhancing its medicinal properties. This method involves grafting blackroot grass with the guardian tree, a technique I discovered that yields remarkable results." Cassandra initially wanted to interrupt him, but as Blake detailed his innovative approach to cultivating blackroot grass, including the principles behind it, she found herself listening intently. The more she heard, the more viable his method seemed. By the time Blake finished explaining, Cassandra was eager to rush home and try it out herself. Staring at Blake in disbelief, Cassandra realized that her attempt to outshine him in herbalism had utterly failed. Blake's knowledge and innovative techniques in the field far surpassed her own. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow for someone as proud as Cassandra. She had always considered herbalism her forte, yet here she was, outclassed by Blake. As Blake observed Cassandra's crestfallen expression, a slight smile played on his lips. He had acquired all his herbalism knowledge the previous night, thanks to a treasure chest that ironically came from Cassandra herself. Despite only achieving beginner proficiency in herbalism, Blake's natural talent and the intensive study session had propelled his understanding and innovation in the field well beyond Cassandra's. Blake's talent as a student was undeniable, especially when it came to herbology. His innovative grafting technique caught the attention of many, including Cassandra's parents, who were compelled to study it closely despite their extensive knowledge. Cassandra herself, having only scratched the surface of herbology, found Blake's technique particularly impressive. Unfortunately, her luck seemed to be waning today, as she only managed to find silver treasure chests. Blake, however, remained unfazed by this minor setback, valuing the experience over the rewards. "Miss Worley?" Blake called out gently, noticing Cassandra's distant demeanor. It appeared his demonstration had overwhelmed her, leaving her momentarily unresponsive. Shaking his head slightly, Blake mused about the lack of a gold treasure chest, half-jokingly accusing the system of taking a commission before deciding to leave Cassandra to her thoughts and head into the herb shop. The shop was run by a middle-aged witch whose appearance was a bit unkempt, a testament to her dedication to growing and studying herbs. Greeting Blake with a warm smile, she mistook him for a first-year student in need of potion ingredients. "Do you sell seeds here?" Blake inquired, his politeness masking his eagerness. "Of course. We have a variety of herb seeds for sale," the shopkeeper responded, her kindness evident. Excited, Blake listed the seeds he was interested in: mandrake, venomous tentacula, and biting kale. The shopkeeper's demeanor changed instantly, her smile vanishing as she pointed towards the door and softly commanded, "Get out." Blake, realizing his mistake in requesting seeds of such dangerous plants from a reputable shop, scratched his head in confusion and left, pondering his next move. Why not try Owl online shopping? He thought aloud, stepping outside. Cassandra, having observed the entire exchange, confronted Blake with a mix of hostility and jealousy. "Why would you want those dangerous seeds?" she asked, baffled by his intentions. "To plant them, of course. What's the harm in having a few dangerous plants?" Blake retorted, his casual dismissal leaving Cassandra at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, Cassandra, driven by a mix of rivalry and intrigue, offered a solution. "I know where you can get those seeds," she said, her voice low. "Where?" Blake asked, his interest piqued. "Nocturne Alley," she whispered. Blake's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes," he exclaimed, slapping his thigh in determination. If reputable sources wouldn't sell to him, he'd turn to less scrupulous ones. The dangers of Nocturne Alley didn't intimidate him. After all, he was armed with a 15-inch wand and ready to face any challenge. P.S. Dear readers, your support through comments, votes, and reviews means the world to me. It motivates me to release more chapters and continue sharing this adventure with you. Thank you. Chapter 33, A Momentary Detour for a Robbery. Blake extended his gratitude to Cassandra with a polite thank you, then bid her farewell and departed. He was familiar with the location of Tumble Alley, having passed by its intersection just the day before. Dumbledore had warned him about it, describing it as a dangerous place teeming with unsavory characters and advising him to steer clear. However, Dumbledore was unaware of Blake's stubborn streak. Despite knowing the risks, Blake was determined to venture in. As Blake walked away, Cassandra watched him go, her expression a complex mix of emotions. Aware of the dangers that lurked within Tumble Alley, Blake wanted to avoid drawing unnecessary attention upon his arrival. To blend in, he took out a coat and, with a flick of his magic wand, transformed it into a cloak, complete with a face scarf. He meticulously checked his disguise to ensure there were no flaws before confidently stepping into the infamous Tumble Alley. Tumble Alley was a lawless place, largely ignored by the Ministry of Magic. Its inhabitants were often those who lived on the fringes of society, and the alley itself was a stark contrast to the bustling Diagon Alley. The shops and the pavement were in a state of disrepair, and the people hurried about with a sense of urgency. Shopkeepers, with their menacing appearances, seemed to embody the essence of malevolence. The merchandise available was equally dubious, ranging from black magic artifacts to grotesque materials of uncertain origin. To the average onlooker, these items would be terrifying, but Blake viewed them with keen interest. He found Tumble Alley intriguing, despite its off-putting odor and the questionable nature of its goods. His purpose was not just to find the seeds he was after, but to explore the alley for other interesting finds. It wasn't long before something caught Blake's eye, a shop that reeked of blood, with visible bloodstains marking its entrance. It was a butcher's shop, dealing in the meat of magical creatures hunted despite legal protections. What piqued Blake's interest, however, was not the shop itself, but a small cage placed outside. Inside, a tiny black creature huddled in a corner, trembling. With just a glance, Blake recognized it as a sniff. Blake had been considering acquiring a sniff for its cuteness and its remarkable ability to attract attention, making it a valuable ally. Unfortunately, the magical pet shops in Diagon Alley did not sell sniffs. Seeing this one in such dire circumstances, Blake decided to purchase it, not only because he wanted a sniff, but also to save it from a grim fate. "You're interested in buying this sniff?" A voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Blake looked up to see a shirtless, portly man wearing suspenders standing at the shop's entrance. "Yes, I want to buy this sniff," Blake confirmed. The man chuckled. "All right, if you can afford it." Blake, curious and undeterred, asked, "How much?" 1,000 gold galleons, the portly man declared with a malevolent grin. Blake exhaled in frustration. He had encountered a robber. "Then, I'm afraid I must decline your offer," Blake responded, maintaining a polite smile. "Hey, you don't really have a choice now," the corpulent man chuckled. Suddenly, Blake found himself encircled by 7 or 8 individuals in the alley. "Don't assume I can't tell you're just a kid under all those layers," one of them taunted. "What do you want?" Blake inquired, his patience wearing thin. "It's been a while since I've had a good meal." "Hey, grab him," the leader commanded. Some youngsters never learn their place, thinking they can just wander into Nocturne Alley to satisfy their curiosity, another sneered. Realizing his disguise had been seen through, Blake removed his cloak. "As I said, I won't be buying that," he stated firmly. "And why is that?" they jeered. "Because," Blake drew his wand with a flourish, "I plan to rob you instead. Hand over anything of value or interest you have on you," he demanded. The group, including T-Head, he fat man, paused, taken aback, before bursting into laughter. "Oh, you really don't know when to quit, do you?" they mocked, closing in on him. Unfazed, Blake raised his wand, ready to make his move. "Stop!" But just as he was about to act, an unexpected interruption came. "Who's interfering now?" the fat man grumbled, looking toward the alley's entrance. Blake's gaze followed. Near the entrance stood a girl, around 13 or 14, with curly hair and a nervous expression. "Stop! Stop! Let that boy go!" she demanded, pointing her wand at the fat man. Blake, still encircled, was taken aback by the girl's sudden appearance. He scratched his head, puzzled, as he didn't recognize her. "Fine, I'll let him go. I'd rather avoid trouble," the fat man conceded, signaling his gang to clear a path. "Come, take the boy and leave before I change my mind," he urged. The girl, upon hearing this, rushed over. Blake sighed, touched by her naivety, but also concerned. Did she truly believe the words of these scoundrels? As she approached, Blake's expression conveyed his skepticism. Predictably, as soon as she entered, the gang blocked the alley's entrance, cutting off any view from Diagon Alley and trapping them both. You didn't keep your promise," the girl exclaimed, realizing the deceit. "Ahem, one moment," Blake interjected, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But she started. "Just wait, I have something to take care of first." "What's that?" "Nothing much. Just a robbery," Blake clarified, his tone casual yet firm. Under the girl's astonished gaze, Blake raised his wand once more. "I already said this was a robbery. Are you all deaf? Hand over your money and anything else of interest." P.S. Dear readers, your support through comments, votes, and reviews means the world to me. Can you guess who this brave young lady is? Chapter 34. Dumbledore, He's My Son. Huh? In a moment of desperation, the burly man lunged towards Blake, intent on seizing him. His mind raced with cruel plans, to beat the boy senseless, then decide whether to sell him off or butcher him for meat. The little girl's fate, in his mind, was even more sinister. As for the magic wand in Blake's grasp, he scoffed at the thought. To him, a wand wielded by an 11-year-old was no more menacing than a toothpick, which, in his opinion, could inflict more pain if it pricked someone. However, Blake had other plans. With a decisive flick of his wand, he unleashed a powerful weather spell. In an instant, the sky crackled, and a massive bolt of lightning, like a wild serpent unleashed, struck down with ferocity. The air was filled with the scent of ozone as the lightning ravaged the street, leaving those who had dared to threaten Blake and the girl charred beyond recognition. Their bodies lay twitching on the ground, a testament to the spell's power. Even the black wizards, who had been observing from a distance with a mix of curiosity and malice, found themselves retreating hastily, no longer willing to confront the young sorcerer's might. The curly-haired girl, miraculously unharmed, stood beside Blake, her beautiful curls now frizzed and standing on end from the static charge of the spell. She was in a state of shock, her mind struggling to comprehend what had just occurred. An 11-year-old boy had just single-handedly defeated a group of dark sorcerers with a display of magic that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Blake, meanwhile, continued to lecture the unconscious man on the ground about the ethics of robbery, all the while effortlessly lifting him with one hand and tossing him into the middle of the street as if he weighed nothing. The display of strength was astonishing, hinting at Blake's proficiency, not just in magic, but in physical combat as well. The curly-haired girl, still in disbelief, pinched herself, hoping to wake from what she believed was a vivid dream. The pain that followed, however, confirmed the reality of her situation. She looked at Blake, tears forming in her eyes, not from pain but from the overwhelming realization that what she had witnessed was real. Blake, noticing her distress, approached with concern. "What's wrong? Are you hurt? The spell was controlled. It shouldn't have harmed you," he said, genuinely puzzled. Through her tears, the girl managed to stammer, I'm not dreaming." At that moment, Blake received a notification. A gold treasure chest had been awarded for the extreme shock his actions had caused. Meanwhile, Dumbledore returned to his office, weary from his travels. His recent journey had taken him across half the globe, leaving him exhausted. Yet, the events that unfolded in that distant street would soon demand his attention, adding another layer to the already complex tapestry of the wizarding world's challenges. Despite his robust health, Dumbledore was feeling the weight of his years. The demands of his dual roles, both at Hogwarts and with the Ministry of Magic, were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. He had resolved to take a well-deserved rest before visiting Diagon Alley to check in on Blake, a thought that filled his heart with a sense of warmth. As he settled into his office, a knock at the door interrupted his musings. "Come in," he called out, his voice tinged with fatigue. Professor McGonagall entered briskly, her expression one of relief. "Albus, you're finally back." "I am," Dumbledore replied with a weary smile. "After some rest, I'll be ready to attend to my duties at the school." McGonagall sighed, her concern evident. "Albus, I didn't come to rush you back to work. I came to remind you that you're not as young as you once were. Perhaps it's time to let Fudge handle the Ministry's affairs on his own." Dumbledore's response took her by surprise. "Thank you, Minerva. I will seriously consider your advice." It was an unusual concession from him. Wolfrey had always politely dismissed her concerns in the past, continuing his work with the Ministry regardless. Changing the subject, McGonagall mentioned, "Albus, about the boy you spoke of last time." She produced a letter from her robes, the admission letter for Blake. "Should I address it to Blake Grindelwald?" "No, use just Blake. His last name could bring him unnecessary trouble," Dumbledore advised. McGonagall nodded, putting the envelope away, her gaze lingering on Dumbledore, who had promised to explain everything upon his return. "Please, have a seat," Dumbledore offered, gesturing to a chair. "Would you like some tea or pumpkin juice?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you," McGonagall replied, taking a seat across from him. With a tap of his wand, Dumbledore conjured a pot of tea and 2 cups, filling the air with the comforting aroma of the brew. "This matter. I trust you with it because you understand the significance of that surname," Dumbledore began, his voice serious. "But I must ask you to keep this a secret, for the child's sake. What Grindelwald did has no bearing on him." McGonagall, understanding the gravity of the situation, nodded in agreement. The name Grindelwald had cast a long shadow over their world, and the thought of any connection to him had filled her with dread during Dumbledore's absence. "Don't worry, Grindelwald remains confined in Nurmengard," Dumbledore reassured her, sensing her unease. "This is merely a historical footnote, a remnant of Grindelwald's past." Feeling somewhat relieved, McGonagall ventured, "Then, this child, who exactly is Grindelwald to him?" Dumbledore hesitated, the weight of his next words apparent. "It's not just about who Grindelwald is, but rather the relationship between him and me." McGonagall, puzzled, urged him to continue. Taking a deep breath, Dumbledore finally revealed, "Blake, that boy is my son." The revelation was so shocking that McGonagall spat out her tea, staring at Dumbledore with wide, disbelieving eyes. P.S. Dear readers, your support through comments, votes, and feedback is immensely appreciated. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where I'll reveal more about the mysterious sister. Chapter 35, A Revelation and a Rescue. In other words, Professor McGonagall paused, seeking clarification. "Strictly speaking, Blake is your and Grindelwald's son." Dumbledore had recently confided in Professor McGonagall about the events of the past few days, including the revelation of Blake's identity. Given that Professor McGonagall had seen the name, Dumbledore found it impossible to keep the truth from her. Fortunately, she was a person of trust. "You've already adopted the child. No, rather, you've brought him into the Dumbledore family, haven't you?" she inquired. "Yes, I took him to Diagon Alley the day before yesterday to purchase his school supplies," Dumbledore confirmed with a nod. "Congratulations, Albus," Professor McGonagall said, her smile warm. She was congratulating him not just on finding a relative, but on the fact that, despite his age, Dumbledore had someone to care for him, ensuring he wouldn't face his final days in solitude at St. Mungo's. "Thank you, Minerva," Dumbledore replied, touched by her words. "If that's the case, Albus, shouldn't you change his surname back to Dumbledore? Now that the child has returned to the Dumbledore family," she suggested thoughtfully. Dumbledore waved his hand dismissively. "Everyone knows I've never married or had children. Changing his surname to Dumbledore would only bring unnecessary criticism upon the child. I'm old. Criticism of my personal life doesn't affect me. But Blake, I don't want him to grow up amidst such talk." Professor McGonagall sighed, understanding his point. "All right, then I'll regard the child as your adopted son. You're old and chose to adopt. No one will question that. Now I must get back to work. You should take some time to be with the child." No wonder the child is so talented in transfiguration. I'm already looking forward to seeing him at school. "Cassandra, what's wrong? You've been restless all morning," Mrs. Worley observed with concern. "It's nothing. I'll go out for a walk again," Cassandra replied, barely hiding her turmoil. But as soon as she was out of sight, her thoughts raced. She had encountered Blake in Diagon Alley while accompanying her mother. After a brief interaction, her jealousy towards Blake's talents had flared. A dark thought had emerged, to deceive Blake into venturing into Nocturne Alley, a place notorious for its dangers. If he went there, he might not return, and she would regain her status as the prodigious talent. Yet recalling Blake's innocent excitement, Cassandra felt a deep conflict within. He might be harmed because of me. But surely, no one would be foolish enough to venture into Nocturne Alley, right? But he seemed so eager. No, it's not my fault, even if something happens to him there. But I know I was the one who misled him. Torn between her conscience and darker impulses, Cassandra wandered Diagon Alley, lost in thought. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar figure. "Professor Dumbledore," she called out, running towards him. Miss Worley, what's the matter?" Dumbledore asked, his good mood evident. "Professor, Blake went into Nocturne Alley." Cassandra blurted out, panic in her voice. "What? Let's go." Dumbledore responded immediately, his expression turning serious as he drew his wand, his grip whitening with urgency. In Nocturne Alley, Blake sat leisurely on a sofa, introducing himself to a senior. "My name is Blake, Blake Green. And you are?" Blake was cradling a small creature in his arms, while next to him, a portly man with a puffy face eagerly served him tea. Nearby, two dark wizards were diligently massaging Blake's legs. "My name is Penelope Cleavage," she introduced herself, though she quickly added, "You can call me Penelope." Penelope observed the scene before her with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Moments ago, these dark wizards had been fierce and threatening, their cries for blood chilling the air. Yet now, they were as docile as lambs, attending to the whims of an 11-year-old wizard. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on her. However, the fact that this young wizard had managed to subdue a group of dark wizards single-handedly was even more astonishing. "Senior Penelope, please, have a seat," Blake invited, gesturing to the spacious sofa that seemed too large for him alone. He patted the empty space beside him, signaling for Penelope to join him. "There's a lot I'd like to ask you about Hogwarts." Before Penelope could respond, a stern voice echoed from the alleyway, causing Blake to nearly tumble off the sofa in surprise. "Professor Dumbledore?" Penelope exclaimed, equally startled to see Dumbledore stride into Knockturn Alley, with a young girl in a green dress trailing behind him. The girl's face bore a hint of anxiety, yet her curiosity about the infamous alley was unmistakable. It wasn't until she peeked around Dumbledore that she noticed the peculiar sight of Blake, seated like a king among his subjects, with the once menacing figures now serving him obediently. "He's completely fine," she murmured, her astonishment evident. "And they're actually serving him? How did he manage that?" Despite her shock, Cassandra felt a wave of relief and even happiness for Blake's safety. "Blake, care to explain?" Dumbledore asked, his tone light yet expectant as he put away his wand. Caught off guard, Blake was momentarily speechless, his mind racing. Then, he received a notification about a silver treasure chest, which only added to his confusion. I trusted you so much, and you betrayed me," he exclaimed, though part of him had suspected that the young lady might have lured him into a trap. However, he hadn't anticipated Dumbledore's intervention, nor had he expected to be waiting in Knockturn Alley for the dark wizards to procure seeds for him. The dark wizards' shock at seeing Dumbledore was palpable. They wondered about the nature of Blake's relationship with the esteemed wizard. Was he a relative, or why else would Dumbledore show such concern? The sight of Dumbledore drawing his wand had sent the portly man into such a panic that he felt as if he'd lost weight from fear alone. "If only I'd known about his powerful ally sooner," he lamented internally, regretting any hostility towards Blake. P.S. Dear readers, your support through comments, votes, and reviews means the world to me. I promise to complete the Diagon Alley storyline today. Chapter 36, The House Elf. Baker Cassandra's expression soured when she overheard Blake referring to her as a snitch. "Humph. I was just concerned you might meet your end in Knockturn Alley," she protested. "All right, Blake. Miss Warren is simply concerned for your well-being," Dumbledore interjected, his tone soothing yet firm. "I wasn't worried about him," Cassandra muttered under her breath. Dumbledore continued, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight, "And have I not mentioned before? You should avoid Knockturn Alley." Blake felt the gravity of Dumbledore's words pressing down on him. "I was wrong," he conceded, bowing his head in acknowledgement of his mistake. Yet, despite his apparent contrition, Blake harbored a secret. Unbeknownst to Dumbledore, Blake had mastered the beginner's brain seal spell from his newbie gift pack. Thus, when Dumbledore employed the mind capture spell to gauge the sincerity of Blake's apology, he was misled into believing Blake's remorse was genuine and decided not to pursue the matter further. After all, Blake seemed unharmed, didn't he? Dumbledore's attention then shifted to Penelope. "And you, Miss Cleavage, what brings you here?" he inquired with a gentle smile. Penelope glanced at Blake before explaining her predicament. She felt somewhat wronged. Her intentions had been purely to rescue the boy, but she ended up being deceived herself. Sharing her story made her feel slightly embarrassed, yet she knew honesty was her best course. Meanwhile, the Dark Warlock was in a state of utter despair. Not only had he attempted to capture a child under Dumbledore's protection, but he had also planned to kidnap a student in broad daylight. Looking up at the sky, he resigned himself to his fate, realizing resistance was futile against the formidable duo of Dumbledore and Blake. If only he had paid more attention during his phantom transfiguration lessons, he might have had a chance to escape. But now, caught in Dumbledore's terrifying gaze, he felt his resolve crumble. Dumbledore then praised Penelope. "Your bravery is commendable, Miss Cleavage." However, he quickly added a word of caution. "But remember, before acting heroically, you must ensure your own safety first." He stressed the importance of self-preservation, pointing out that reckless actions could jeopardize not only the individual's safety, but also the chance of saving others. Penelope nodded, feeling a mix of pride and shame. As a Ravenclaw, she regretted being so easily duped. She realized that had she informed Blake or sought help from an Auror, they might have avoided the danger altogether. Dumbledore concluded, "You're young and haven't been exposed to the darker aspects of the world. Now, please wait for me at the Leaky Cauldron. I have matters to attend to here in Nocturne Alley and will join you shortly." As Blake and the others left Nocturne Alley, Penelope breathed a sigh of relief, vowing never to return. Cassandra, however, cast a complicated glance at Blake before departing abruptly, claiming she had no time for a meal. Blake was puzzled by Cassandra's reaction. Her anger in Nocturne Alley had been palpable, yet it hadn't triggered a reward from the system. He wondered if there was a limit to such rewards, but dismissed the thought, expecting the system to notify him if that were the case. Penelope then returned Sniff to Blake, expressing her gratitude for his help, but declining his invitation to dine together. Blake sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I've been out for so long, my family will be worried." With no other option, Blake had to make his way back to the Leaky Cauldron alone. First, he made sure to secure Sniff in his room, sternly advising the creature not to wander off. Despite Sniff's usual disregard for instructions, being 10 pounds in weight and 9 pounds worth of rebellion, Blake's status as an archdruid commanded some level of obedience. While waiting, Blake decided to utilize his time productively by heading to the kitchen of the Leaky Cauldron, or prepare a lavish lunch. Dumbledore's arrival at the tavern was met with astonishment at Blake's culinary prowess, earning Blake another silver treasure chest for his efforts. After the meal, Blake's curiosity got the better of him. "What happened to those dark wizards?" he inquired. Dumbledore, with a tone of finality, responded, "I've handed them over to the Aurors. The Ministry of Magic will handle the rest." Blake nodded, understanding the implications. Unless something unexpected occurred, those dark wizards would likely spend a considerable amount of time in Azkaban. He felt a twinge of regret. Dumbledore's timely intervention meant those wizards hadn't had the chance to procure the seeds Blake had hoped for. Thus, his trip to Nocturne Alley had been in vain. Dumbledore's visit was brief, and he soon departed from Diagon Alley, unable to spend the entire day with Blake. After seeing Dumbledore off, Blake planned to return to his room for a nap before heading to Ollivander's wand shop later in the afternoon. However, upon entering his room, Blake immediately sensed that something was amiss. The room was spotless, unnaturally so. Earlier, when he had returned Sniff to the room, his books had been strewn about in disarray. Now, the bed was meticulously made, the books organized by category, and the old floorboards shone with cleanliness. Something was definitely wrong. Blake doubted Tom, the innkeeper, would go to such lengths. The cleanliness of the floor alone raised suspicions. Suddenly, Sniff's cries from the table caught Blake's attention. The creature gestured frantically, conveying a message only Blake could understand. Drawing his wand, Blake fixed his gaze on a corner of the room. "Come out," he commanded. "Whose house elf are you? I'll count to 3. 3! With a loud bang, a scrawny house elf appeared before Blake, looking at him with fear. "Little master?" Blake asked, sitting down on the bed trying to make sense of the situation. "Whose house elf are you?" The house elf, trembling, replied, "Beck. Beck is a house elf of the Grindelwald family." Blake's eyes widened in shock. The Grindelwald family. Chapter 37. Pets Should Be Grand. A shocking revelation. Blake was taken aback. The house elf before him, Beck, was actually from the Grindelwald family? This revelation meant that Grindelwald himself had taken notice of Blake. Beck, with a hint of pride in his voice, explained, "Beck has served the Grindelwald family for generations. My father, Gucci, currently tends to the old master at Nurmengard. He recommended me to serve the old master directly, and I was accepted. Understanding dawned on Blake. He knew he had to inform Dumbledore about this development immediately. The intricacies of wizarding politics were not his concern. He was more focused on practical matters at the moment. Looks like I need to buy an owl, Blake mused. Without one, communicating with Dumbledore would be a hassle. Beck, let's go shopping, Blake announced, deciding to make the most out of having a house elf sent by Grindelwald himself. Unlike Hermione, Blake wasn't particularly troubled by the plight of house elves or intent on dismantling their servitude. He simply aimed to treat his own elf a bit better than the norm. Leaving Sniff behind, Blake and Beck headed to the Owl Emporium. Upon their arrival, the shop assistant eagerly showcased various owls, recognizing Blake as a member of an ancient wizarding family, a potential big spender. However, none of the owls caught Blake's attention until he spotted a massive eagle owl lurking in a corner. Its sheer size was enough to make Blake decide on the spot. "I want that one," he declared. The shop assistant hesitated, explaining, "That eagle owl hasn't been fully tamed yet. It's still quite wild and has been known to lash out." Blake, undeterred and even more intrigued, approached the eagle owl. It was the first creature he had encountered that seemed utterly unaffected by his archdruid aura. "How about this?" Blake proposed. "If I can get it to follow me, you give me a 10% discount." The clerk, seeing no harm in the deal since the owl had been difficult to sell due to its temperament and appetite, agreed. "If you can truly tame it, it's yours." Blake then made an offer to the eagle owl, promising a diet far more appealing than the owl biscuits it was currently subjected to. The eagle owl, seemingly understanding, immediately showed interest. "Let's go home," Blake said with a smile, extending his arm for the eagle owl to perch upon. The shop assistant and the onlookers were left in awe. Despite his youth, Blake had not only chosen one of the most challenging pets, but had also managed to win it over effortlessly. With a few words, Blake had convinced the giant eagle owl to accompany him, leaving the shop assistant and the onlookers in disbelief. Their skepticism was evident. They couldn't fathom how Blake, with his slender arms and legs, could manage such a large bird with ease. Yet, as the eagle owl gracefully landed on Blake's arm, all doubts were silenced. The shop assistant grimaced at the thought of eating the iron feed bag, a bet made in jest and now regretted. Blake, unfazed by the astonishment he had caused, simply blinked at the stunned shop assistant and exited Ira's owl shop with the owl perched on his arm. The onlookers were left in awe, murmuring among themselves about the boy's strength and the peculiar bond he seemed to share with the owl, which appeared to understand his words. Blake, however, was not swayed by their admiration. He had no interest in a cage for the owl, believing it deserved the freedom to roam outside. "Let's get something done first. We'll have meat when we return," he said, handing a letter to the eagle owl, which promptly took off into the sky. With the owl dispatched, Blake muttered about the cold reception and hurried to Ollivander's magic wand shop, only to find a sign indicating it was temporarily closed. This was an unusual sight, as the shop was known for its steadfast operation. Inside, he found Mr. Ollivander looking significantly more worn than just a day before, as if the years had suddenly caught up with him. Ollivander, upon noticing Blake, asked for a moment to gather some final measurements for the wand's material. He handed Blake a peculiar ruler adorned with gemstones, instructing him to wave it with all his might. As Blake complied, the gems illuminated one by one until the ruler unexpectedly shattered. Ollivander, faced with the broken tool, mused that a traditional wooden wand might not suffice for Blake. Retreating to the back of the shop, Ollivander promised to return with a potential solution, hinting at the possibility of Blake receiving his unique wand that very day. Blake, though once would have been thrilled at the prospect, felt a subdued excitement. He already possessed a powerful wand, diminishing the anticipation of Ollivander's creation. Nevertheless, he respected the challenge Ollivander had presented, recognizing it as a mutual endeavor born from a shared passion for magic. As Blake waited, he idly flipped through a book on the table, while Baker stood silently in the corner, almost blending into the shadows, a quiet observer to the unfolding events. Chapter 38. Ollivander's Discovery Hiss. "A wand I don't recognize?" The book Blake had stumbled upon was actually a notebook filled with what appeared to be studies on wands. The handwriting was scribbled and chaotic, unmistakably the insights of Mr. Ollivander himself. Blake, respecting the privacy and potential trade secrets of the Ollivander family, decided it was best not to peruse the notebook without permission. After all, the Ollivanders had been in the wand business for generations, and it was possible that the notebook contained sensitive information. Just as Blake closed the notebook, Mr. Ollivander emerged from the back of the shop, holding a new wand. He noticed Blake's action, but dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Oh, it doesn't matter. You can read it," he said, revealing his plans to publish an introductory book on wand studies. The notebook was a draft of his upcoming publication. He encouraged Blake to read it and even try his hand at wand crafting with some materials he had set aside. "You might have to stay here for a while today," Ollivander added, explaining that they had many tests to conduct. Blake, intrigued, accepted the wand Ollivander offered and waved it with force. To their surprise, all the gems on the wand lit up and it buzzed without exploding, a sign that they had finally found the right material for Blake's wand. Ollivander, visibly excited, hurried back to his workshop, leaving Blake to explore the manuscript. It was an easy read, covering the basics of wand studies, a subject Blake was already familiar with. However, his expertise in alchemy sparked several innovative ideas on combining wand crafting with alchemical principles. As Blake waited for Ollivander to return, he decided to experiment with the materials on a nearby workbench. His goal was to create a wand with enhanced attacking power. The workbench offered limited options, with only a small piece of ebony wood and a tuft of cheap, horse-shaped water monster mane available. Despite the mane being considered an inferior core material, it was perfect for a beginner's practice, as mentioned in Ollivander's manuscript. Undeterred by the lack of premium materials, Blake set to work with a carving knife. After some time, he held up a wand that, despite its humble components, was significantly improved through alchemy. Satisfied with his creation, Blake aimed to further enhance the wand's power through specific enchantments. As he delved deeper into his work, the initial boredom vanished, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for the unique wand he was creating. Blake had recently learned about magical ancient texts, such as Niven, and decided to use alchemy to engrave them directly onto the inside of his wand. This was the simplest solution he could think of, given the limited materials at his disposal. Ideally, he would have preferred to use a dragon heartstring for the core and mithril to embed the ancient runes, enhancing the wand's power with additional materials adaptable to magical energy. Holding the wand, Blake was eager to test its capabilities, despite its unassuming appearance. However, he was aware of the risks. Dumbledore had advised him to proceed with caution, reminding him that using other wands was an option, but the thought of his creation exploding due to insufficient control was daunting. This was his first attempt at wand making, and the prospect of failure was disheartening. After much deliberation, Blake decided against testing the wand himself. Instead, he turned his attention to a chocolate pudding served with a plate and a small spoon by his attentive house elf, Baker. Just then, the doorbell rang, signaling an unexpected visitor. Given that Mr. Ollivander had closed the shop for the day, Blake was surprised to see Cassandra enter. "Why is it you again?" Cassandra asked with a frown. "Did you not want to see me?" Blake replied, scratching his head, puzzled by her presence since he thought she had gone home. Cassandra explained she was there to pick up her custom knot-made wand, prompting Blake to remember such an arrangement. He informed her that Mr. Ollivander was currently unavailable and suggested she wait. Despite her reluctance to spend more time with Blake, whom she found infuriating, Cassandra chose to stay, not wanting to appear intimidated. Observing Baker, Cassandra inquired if he was Blake's house elf, to which Blake confirmed and promptly sent Baker on an errand to fetch watermelon juice. Baker, eager to escape the drowsiness of standing idle, hurried out. Left alone with Cassandra, Blake considered making another wand, exploring a different concept. Curious about his activities, Cassandra couldn't help but ask what he was doing. Without waiting for her objection, Blake handed her the wand he had crafted and, mimicking Mr. Ollivander's voice, encouraged her to wave it. To their astonishment, a gentle breeze swept through the shop, lifting Cassandra's blonde hair and casting a radiant glow on her face. The wand seemed remarkably effective. Mr. Ollivander, emerging from the back, was surprised to see the wand in Cassandra's hand, recognizing that it was not one of his creations. Upon closer inspection, he noted its fresh appearance and the scent of wood, indicating it was newly made and yet to be finished with protective paint. This unexpected discovery left him intrigued, as he realized Blake had crafted a wand that perfectly suited Cassandra, challenging the traditional methods of wand-making and hinting at Blake's untapped potential in the magical arts. In the realm of muscle and bone, the author has made a bold decision to release an abundance of chapters. While the standard for new books might be 1,500 words per chapter, this author has gone above and beyond, delivering 2,500 words per installment. It's clear that the author is putting in a tremendous amount of effort. So in appreciation of this hard work, let's show our support with flowers and tickets. Chapter 39, Cassandra's Astonishment. How can you know everything? What? You just learned this? A new wand. Ollivander stared at Blake in disbelief. It's still in my shop. Didn't you mention I could use the materials there to practice? Blake scratched his head. You made this? Ollivander was astounded. That's correct. You've learned wand making before? Ollivander asked, surprised. Nope. I've only read a few books about it, Blake replied, then added, Then I tried making one. Ollivander's eyes widened in shock. You made this? With those materials? Yes, Blake confirmed. Ollivander examined the wand once more. Its body was crafted from black sandalwood, and the core contained the mane of a horse-shaped water monster. Flowers bloom, Ollivander uttered, and a flower materialized at the wand's tip. This... Ollivander looked at Blake, amazed. You managed to craft a wand of such quality with such an unconventional core material, and on your first attempt? Ding, detected emotions of shock. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. To Ollivander, the wand's craftsmanship had some rough edges, yet it performed as well as any other wand, a feat that seemed almost illogical. I incorporated some alchemy knowledge, Blake explained, and I also referenced some ancient texts, engraving them inside the wand. Ollivander's interest was immediately piqued. Oh, which ancient texts did you use? He had experimented with blending alchemy and wand-making before, achieving impressive results. However, the idea of combining wand-making with ancient texts was entirely new to him. This revelation opened up a whole new field of study. As the elder and the young man engaged in their enthusiastic conversation, a clear cough interrupted them. Cassandra could no longer contain her frustration. Being overlooked once was tolerable, but twice was too much, especially for someone of her talent and background in the magical community. Oh, cough. I'm terribly sorry, Miss Worley, Mr. Ollivander said, clearly embarrassed by his oversight. It seemed that Blake's presence and his knack for surprises had inadvertently led to Cassandra being neglected. The wand specially crafted for you is ready. I'll fetch it now, Ollivander hurriedly said, moving behind the counter. Cassandra, observing Blake still examining his handmade wand, couldn't resist asking, Is this truly your first attempt at making a wand? That's correct. I was perusing Mr. Ollivander's manuscript in the shop, and after finishing, he suggested I could practice using the materials, Blake explained. Before he could continue, a fragrant breeze wafted by, and a figure sat down beside him. I want to try too. Perhaps you should start with Mr. Ollivander's introductory manuscript, Blake suggested. Ding! Anger from embarrassment detected. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining a silver treasure chest. After receiving her wand, Cassandra didn't leave immediately. Instead of trying it out, she picked up Ollivander's manuscript and began reading it earnestly. Ollivander didn't mind. He had intended for others to review his introductory guide to gather feedback and understand if his explanations were clear. Blake had already read it, but his perspective was an outlier. Cassandra, being a true beginner, provided a fresh viewpoint. Once Ollivander had taken Blake's measurements, he returned to his work. Meanwhile, Baker entered the shop, carrying a tray with 3 glasses of watermelon juice. Little master, your watermelon juice is here. Okay, thank you for your hard work, Blake responded, casually picking up a glass of the juice. Oh, Little Master actually praised Baker. He said that Baker had worked hard. Blake halted the enthusiastic ramblings of his assistant with a firm command, urging him to deliver a glass of watermelon juice to Cassandra, who was deeply engrossed in her reading. After ensuring Cassandra received her drink, Blake retreated to a corner with his wen glass, savoring the juice in solitude. Cassandra, having finished her reading, approached the workbench with determination. She was resolved to surpass Blake in wand-making, despite being a novice. Wand-crafting, however, was no simple task, especially for someone with little experience in woodworking. The wand's body, crafted from magically potent wood, required precise, manual shaping, a skill Cassandra had yet to master. Blake, observing her struggle, offered guidance, correcting her technique and advising her on the proper way to cut the wood. Initially resistant to his input, Cassandra soon realized she was out of her depth and begrudgingly accepted his help. Despite her efforts, the result was far from satisfactory. The wand was uneven, riddled with holes, and unintentionally curved, a stark contrast to the flawless wand Blake had produced. The comparison deepened Cassandra's frustration, highlighting her lack of skill. Yet, in that moment of defeat, she received an unexpected notification: a silver treasure chest, a small consolation for her efforts. Blake, observing her disappointment, reassured her that her attempt was commendable for a beginner. However, his modesty belied his true expertise, honed not only through practice, but also with the aid of a mysterious system that elevated his craftsmanship to professional levels. Taking Cassandra's flawed wand, Blake set to work, his skilled hands swiftly correcting its imperfections. Cassandra watched in awe as the wand transformed under his touch, her frustration giving way to a mix of admiration and defeat. She couldn't help but question how Blake, who claimed to know only a little, could possess such remarkable skill, a skill that would surely astonish even the renowned wandmaker Mr. Ollivander. In that moment, Cassandra's resolve wavered, overshadowed by Blake's undeniable talent. A complex mix of emotions stirred within her, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their rivalry. Chapter 40, The Mithril Wand and the Seeds of Cassandra. "All right, it's finally complete," Mr. Ollivander exclaimed as he emerged from the back of the shop, interrupting Cassandra's deep thoughts. "Give it a try. Don't hold back. Cast your spell with all your might." Blake set aside the carving knife and turned his attention to the wand in Ollivander's hand. It was a silver wand, about 13 inches long, and appeared to be made of some kind of metal. As Blake took the wand, he noticed its heft. This wand was far from light. "The wand's core is crafted from mithril," Ollivander announced. "A wooden core simply couldn't withstand your full-force casting." Initially, Blake felt comfortable holding the wand. He raised it, aiming at a stool beside the counter. With a swift motion, whoosh, the stool transformed into an exquisite sofa. Cassandra, witnessing the scene, clenched her teeth in frustration. Blake, surprised and pleased, examined the wand in his hand. It felt remarkably compatible with him, and crucially, it remained stable after he channeled his magic into it. No explosion ensued. Eager to test its limits, Blake raised the wand once more, this time exerting his full strength, both magically and physically. The wand sliced through the air, emitting a crisp buzz as it vibrated momentarily before settling down. Astonishingly, the wand withstood the powerful spell, and Blake could feel an enhancement in his magic, though not as significant as with a custom-defined wand. Nonetheless, it was a marked improvement over a standard wand. "Ah, how wonderful! Mithril truly is an exceptional material," Ollivander mused. "However, it's not suitable for everyone. Without sufficient magical power, mithril will instead drain the user's magic. This wand is uniquely yours. No one else can wield it." Blake understood Ollivander's explanation. The wand was akin to a heavy broadsword, capable of fine precision but not meant for just anyone to wield. Later that evening, at the leaky cauldron, Dumbledore addressed Blake. "Is this the house elf you mentioned, Blake?" "Yes," Blake nodded. "I want him to stay. If he's sent back, he'll suffer greatly." "Then he shall stay," Dumbledore agreed. Despite Grindelwald's dissatisfaction with sending a house elf, he recognized the thoughtfulness behind Blake's request. Having a house elf by Blake's side would ensure his well-being, a kindness that Dumbledore found commendable. Having acquired his wand, Blake had no reason to linger in Diagon Alley and planned to return to Godric's Hollow that night. His time in the alley had been fruitful, though he regretted not purchasing the seeds he had been contemplating. After dinner, Blake returned to his room to pack his luggage, only to find that Baker, the house elf, had already neatly packed everything. Blake smiled appreciatively at Baker, grateful for the convenience a house elf provided. Suddenly, the sound of flapping wings caught Blake's attention. An owl flew in through the window, landing on the table. Initially, Blake thought it was his eagle owl, but to his surprise, it was a smaller owl carrying a small cloth bag in its beak. After catching Blake's eye, the owl dropped the bag on the table and flew away. Curious, Blake opened the cloth bag to discover a large pile of seeds, the very ones he had been yearning for. Overwhelmed with joy, he quickly covered his mouth to stifle his excitement. Dumbledore would certainly confiscate these items if he saw them. Amidst the small bag's contents, a note caught Blake's attention. It read, "I have plenty of these seeds at home. It seems you're the only one who hasn't explored the world enough to desire them so fervently. Considering your unfortunate situation, I've decided to pack some for you. Take them or leave them." It was signed, Cassandra Worley. Blake stared at the note, dumbfounded. The seeds he had longed for, which he believed were beyond his reach, had been casually sent to him by Cassandra. That night, Blake secluded himself in his room, quietly accessing the system space. He contemplated the 9 silver treasure chests and the single golden treasure chest before him. The system had a peculiar way of awarding treasure chests. The stronger the target's personal ability and the more intense their emotions, the higher the likelihood of dropping treasure chests, especially those of higher quality. Essentially, luck played a crucial role. Despite Dumbledore's emotional involvement, there was still a chance of not receiving any treasure chests. Blake sighed, acknowledging the role of fortune in his recent endeavors. "These past few days have been eventful, yet my luck has been dreadful. There should have been a higher chance of obtaining gold treasure chests, or better," he lamented. Resolved not to dwell on his misfortune, Blake commanded, "System, open all 9 silver treasure chests at once." The system responded with a series of notifications. "Congratulations to the host for achieving beginner mastery in magical zoology. Congratulations to the host for achieving beginner mastery in potions. Congratulations to the host for gaining 1,000 experience points in herbalism. Congratulations to the host for achieving beginner mastery in prophecy. Congratulations to the host for gaining 1,000 experience points in transformation. Congratulations to the host for obtaining advanced prophecy talent. Since the host already possesses superb prophecy talent, this reward has been converted to 1,000 experience points in prophecy. Congratulations to the host for gaining 1,000 experience points in potions. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 5,000 gold coins. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a mutated devil's web seed." Blake reviewed the rewards, his brow furrowing slightly at the mention of experience points, a term he hadn't encountered before in the system's notifications. This implied the existence of an experience bar within the system, but its location was unclear. Curious, he experimented with various commands, attempting to uncover more about this feature. Experience bar? No response. Skill experience? Still no response. Finally, he tried system panel? Ding! Opening the system panel for the host. A virtual screen materialized before him, but the information it displayed only deepened his frustration. Clenching his teeth, he demanded, "System manual." Ding! System manual download failed. Blake's initial excitement over the treasure chest's rewards quickly turned to confusion and irritation as he grappled with the system's complexities and limitations.